develop a COVID pneumonia, and you would then be one of those that may potentially end up requiring critical care, oxygen support, and ventilation. Now, for the vast majority of patients, you will exhibit these symptoms. You can manage yourself at home and you will be fine. Even the ones that present with respiratory symptoms, you can manage yourself at home up to a certain point, and we will talk about this. General advice is the 3 Ds: distance, dosage, and disperse. Distance, we still maintain, please limit your exposure. Do not walk around in the malls, visiting friends. Some people continue to disregard the advice of the Department of Health to the detriment of everyone around them. You might be one of those who gets the infection and you just become a carrier. You are one of those mild asymptomatic people. That's one. For those that have gone back to work, my advice is always try and maintain a distance of minimum 1 meter and ensure that you maintain your masks on you. The fact that you are friends, the fact that you are colleagues does not necessarily mean you will not transmit the virus to one another. The second thing is we are experiencing an increasing number of losses, and we find ourselves having to attend funerals. Funerals have been identified as one of the hotspots in terms of transmission. And just because you are family and related does not mean you will not transmit the infection to one another. So in terms of the second D, which is dosage, try and limit the dosage of virus that you will then expose yourself to by ensuring that you always maintain a mask on your face when interacting with others. Yes, of course, in the home, when you are with your immediate family, there is very little need to do that, but extended family, workplace, ensure that you maintain your mask on. And then the third D is disperse. It has been shown that virus particles remain suspended in the air, and therefore, if you are back at work or if you are in an environment where you have to be with other people, ensure that there is adequate ventilation. Ensure that windows remain open to ensure good movement of air and therefore minimize the suspension of virus particles, which you will ultimately be exposed to. As Adventists, we all know the New Start principles, and this is the best time to be revisiting and practicing those principles. Vitamin C, ensure that you are taking 1 gram daily. Trying to gulp down a whole bottle of vitamin C is not going to help you. It will make you sick. So stick to recommended doses of vitamins. Vitamin C, vitamin D, vitamin E have all been shown to be beneficial. Try and ensure that you help your body make its own vitamin D by exposing yourself to sunshine at least 15 to 30 minutes daily. The consumption of an egg or protein meal is highly recommended. Adequate rest, adequate hydration, because you have this hypercoagulable state. Dehydration makes things worse. So this is the most important time in terms of the importance of maintaining adequate hydration. Intake of warm meals is encouraged. And then the most important thing is trying to ensure at least about 30 minutes of walking daily to encourage blood circulation. Now, things that have been found beneficial and that some of us who work in these COVID units have been using to try and enhance immunity is the use of steam inhalation. You can use eucalyptus, you can use peppermint oil, you can use Vicks VapoRub. You don't have to use a humidifier. You can use a normal pot, boiling water. You pour your drops in there and you cover yourself with a blanket. What this does is it helps you practice deep breathing. And also it helps open up your airways. It is normally known to be beneficial to patients who suffer from lung disease, asthmatic patients, and it just helps maintain and open your airways. The use of breathing exercises is encouraged in the mornings and evenings if you can. And this has been shown to open up alveoli that we would normally not use. If you notice, when you're sitting at home relaxed, your breathing tends to be a bit shallow. Now, we need to get into the habit of doing these deep breathing exercises so that we open up even the alveoli that we don't normally use. So if we were to say for argument's sake, we use 2/3 of our lung capacity. When you then start doing these deep breathing exercises, whether it is blowing up balloons, whether it is blowing through a thin straw, blowing water, you then force your lungs to open up. What also helps is exercise, because that forces you to breathe in deeply when you are out of breath. I always give an example that if you have a number of balloons, if you take a normal balloon, when you start blowing the balloon, it feels very difficult to blow it because it's usually it's new. The surface is not used to being expanded, and that's how our alveoli are. However, the more you blow the balloon, the easier it becomes to inflate it and the bigger it becomes. And what we want to do is we want to ensure that our alveoli are able to take in as much air as possible, because that then becomes important when we have the virus now in our lungs. What has also been found beneficial is the use of hot water gargles, whether you do this using plain salt or you use iodine. There are people that are allergic to iodine, so when I give the advice, I always just say, just use plain salt water. That helps remove or kill whatever virus might still be in the oropharynx before it goes down to your lungs. I've started advising people, and I've started practicing this myself, what we call awake proning. So when you're sitting at home, you're watching television, just lie on your tummy and practice deep breathing while lying on your tummy. Most of us, well, a fair number of us are overweight. And what then happens is the bigger your tummy, the higher your diaphragm sits, and the higher your diaphragm, the more blocked your alveoli at the bases of your lungs are. So when you then lie flat on your tummy and you do these deep breathing exercises, you allow the alveoli at the bases of your lungs to expand. And you are essentially just training your lungs and your respiratory muscles so that in case anything happens and they now have to recruit everything that is available, you stand a better chance than someone whose alveoli have been sitting, not really being active. Obviously, pregnant women are not encouraged to lie on their tummy. We encourage augmenting your vitamin and antioxidant intake. And people know the basic lemon, ginger, garlic, and honey infusion that you drink daily. People have been drinking umhlonyane, people have been adding cayenne pepper, turmeric, and cinnamon. It is very important to note that doubling or tripling your dose of all of these things does not help. Everything should be done in moderation. Physicians are now starting to say people that have been drinking umhlonyane in ridiculous doses, not taking any plain water, are now coming in with kidney failure. So in the interest of safeguarding your health, please, whatever you do, just do it in moderation. Then I spoke about acute kidney injury earlier. So what's been observed is that patients who have COVID, the organs seem to be more sensitive to injury than normal. And when you use non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, aspirin, Brufen, and you use it, we haven't quantified the doses that cause this acute kidney injury, but try and avoid. I know people will say take aspirin to help yourself, to help avoid clot formation. But I will highlight that patients have been admitted with kidney injury and kidney failure because of the use of aspirin. So be very careful when you use that. Now, in terms of managing disease at home, and I'm coming towards the end of what I wanted to share. In terms of managing mild disease at home, we are obviously discouraging people roaming around, consulting for little things. And when you have mild disease, you can manage yourself at home. If you have a pulse oximeter, and they've been selling them on Takealot and One Day Only and these online websites, you just monitor to make sure that your oxygen levels are above 90%. Normal is 95 to 100. And obviously, the more overweight you are, you may be sitting at like 93, 94. And once you then get the infection and you do have respiratory symptoms, your oxygen levels may drop. Concern, you should have concern if your oxygen levels drop below 90. That is if you are now managing yourself at home. The second thing to look out for is your normal respiratory rate is about 12 to 15 and maybe up to 18 as an adult breaths per minute. If you are, and it goes up to about 18 if you are on the overweight side of things. So if your respiratory rate goes above 25 to 30, you should seek medical attention. In terms of heart rate, it sits around 80, 60, and down to 60 in people who are ultra athletes. If you are monitoring yourself at home and your heart rate has been steadily increasing, once it's above 100 to 120, you should seek medical attention. Temperature-wise, what you should monitor, obviously, if you have a temperature, it will be above 38, so 38, 39. Once it goes above 39.0, so 39.1, 39.5, up there, you should seek medical attention. In terms of your mental state, some patients have been found to develop confusion as the disease progresses. So if you have someone that is isolating at home and you've been with them, once you start to notice that their mental state is changing, you should seek medical attention. So if you have mild disease and the things that we shared earlier are what you do: hydrate, sunlight, etc., etc. And then these are the things that you look out for. If these change, you should seek medical attention. There are doctors that are available to support. And okay, I'm trying to go back to, sorry, I'm trying to exit the share screen. So there are doctors that are available for consultation, telephonic consultations, which people can use, and you are advised to rather contact those than going into doctors' rooms. Going into doctors' rooms and going into hospital is when you have now gone beyond mild symptoms and you're now exhibiting moderate to severe symptoms. It's just done to ensure that you limit your exposure to super infection. And then the last thing that I wanted to mention is just because you've had COVID infection does not mean you will not be reinfected. People have been diagnosed with COVID after having had the infection, and they've come back a few weeks later, a few months later, and been diagnosed with COVID again. So just because you've had the infection does not mean you cannot get reinfected. And yeah, I think that is for now enough from me. And I'll hand over to Nyarai, and then we'll deal with the questions at the end.
Hey, Phumza. I was thinking maybe deal with the questions on the medical side, because mine is totally different.
Okay, let me see. So Mpumi had asked a question where an entire family becomes infected around the same period. Necessary and practical precautions that you can put in place during the latent or incubation phase. So if you have someone in the family that is infected, the advice is that patient must be in a separate room. Avoid them using the same cutlery, crockery as everyone else. Avoid using the same bathroom as everyone else. And when you serve them, whether you're serving meals or whatever, basically leave them at the door and try and have no contact with the person. And when the person has then recovered, to ensure that you are not exposed to whatever may have been left on linen. Linen is to be washed in boiling water, and the room is to be aerated. There are differing opinions in terms of how long the virus remains active on surfaces. But I personally use 24 to 48 hours in terms of surfaces and countertops. And obviously cleaning surfaces with soap and water or alcohol, 70% alcohol solution if you have. Umpume again said people who are taking aspirin to counter clotting. Oh, Rodney, you can feel free to come in at any point. Like I mentioned in my presentation, the use of aspirin as a counter is very dangerous because people are now being admitted with acute renal injury due to the use of aspirin. There's a phase where you should not use aspirin in the initial phase. And then when you are now in the, when you are being treated, we also try and avoid using it. What we use are things like Clexane, which we use to thin the blood. we try and avoid using aspirin even in a hospital setting. How should we carry ourselves around the vulnerable, specifically parents? It is advised not to visit. So I always advise people that try and avoid exposing yourself to the elderly and exposing and them exposing themselves to others. If you have to visit them, try and avoid physical contact. Try and maintain a distance. The minimum of a meter is what is recommended. Always make sure that you wear a mask. Unfortunately, we live in a very horrible time where being in physical contact is not going to be encouraged. If you have parents that, this is now my personal opinion, that can come and live with you, I would advise that they can come. They can be in like the guest room, just so that you avoid the loneliness and isolation that our elderly are experiencing at this time. I think one of the biggest issues, and I'm sure Nyara is going to touch on that, is there's a lot of depression and anxiety currently. People are dying, people are isolated. And it cannot be good for them, especially because they are elderly, and it's certainly not good for us either. So if you can have immediate family around you, it's always better. Rodney, I don't know if you have anything else to add.
Yes, it's not really so much different to what you had already said. I think on the question of visiting our elderly parents, it is important that we keep the social distance and keep the windows open so that we can have ease of air circulation wherever they are. I would also add then that in the same way that we do when we get into Pick n Pay, etc., then we need to wear the masks even when we are in the home environment. Reason being that you could be asymptomatic, but still then be in the incubation period. But within that period, still be able to transmit the virus to the vulnerable people, even those who are not vulnerable. Thanks.
Over to you, Nyarai.
Hi, guys. So today I'm just going to be talking on death of breadwinners and dealing with loss due to COVID-19. I think one of the things that we realize about death is that it just seems unfair. And when I was just preparing for this, it took me back to when I lost my mom. And one of the quotations that I read said, where there is deep grief, there was great love. And we can all relate with that. Just taking on to what Pumza said, if you can get your parents to come and live with you or your loved ones, do that. Spend as much time as you can with them, because we don't know what's going to happen. And especially the older parents, they're going to die anyway. Sorry to be insensitive. Maybe not from corona, but by this whole isolation, you might find that you haven't spent as much time as you really wanted to with your parents. So if you can, then do that. Spend as much time as you can with your parents. So I just want to talk about losing a breadwinner. Your life totally changes, you know. So suppose it's a family and you lose your father. You might be forced to sell your house. You might be forced to sell your car. If kids were in school, some of them might actually be forced to go to a different school. So all this change is it's really difficult to deal with, because you're dealing with the death of a loved one, and then you're also dealing with change in your life. And then losing a breadwinner, we may look at it negatively and say, because I've lost the one that was providing, what's going to happen to me? But we know that God says he will never forsake us. So we need to continue having that hope that the ultimate provider is God. Yes, we've lost a loved one who was a provider, but we need to continue believing that God was the ultimate provider. Now I'm just going to talk about grief, which is the emotions that we feel when we lose something. And I know we were going to specifically talk about death, but I'd want to believe, because of COVID-19, it's just not death that's causing us grief. Some people are losing their health. Some have lost their jobs. Some have had their salaries cut. So you have loss of financial stability. Some have lost, that sense of, I'm going to achieve something, the dreams that you had. So people that were in schools that were looking forward to finishing and getting into the work field, they've lost that dream. And that can also cause grief. Having someone dealing with a serious illness like corona, it is not easy to take care of someone that's sick, especially a disease that is contagious, because then you don't know how close you can be, you don't know how much attention you need to give to them. So all those things can cause us grief. Losing a friendship. So we are going to talk about death, but I would want us all to realize how we can use some of the steps that we use to deal with grief. We can also deal with all these things that I talked about, losing a job. You can also go through the same process, because grieving just means you are responding to something negative, or a negative trauma that has happened to you. One of the things about grief, because I had to sort of dig deep inside, think about when I lost my mom. There is something that happens in your mind when you lose someone. I hope we all know the stages of grief. So the first one being denial. When someone called and told me that my mom had passed away, the first thing was, no, they made a mistake. It cannot be my mom. I just spoke to her. And your mind is stuck on, I just spoke to her, but she's gone. And I got into a space of, no, they're going to call me back and say, no, she's fine. We actually made a mistake. And then after that, I'm thinking, oh God, please bring her back. So now I'm bargaining with God. I'm like, please, 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 I'll do anything. I'll be a good girl. But just that accepting that this person is gone, it's a difficult thing to do immediately. And then, so you may not go through the stages sequentially. So for me, it was those two. And then, so afterwards, I'd convinced myself, no, she's not dead. So, when we get there, she'll be fine. Someone has unmuted on his one. Can you please mute? So when I got home, I just went into organization mode, where to make sure that everything was organized for the funeral. So I didn't have time to even think about my mom. We were just, on autopilot. And then that was done. On the day of the funeral, when we were burying her, after burial, I remember thinking, we just left my mom alone and she's cold. It didn't make sense, but that's how I felt, like she's alone and she's cold. And I'm thinking, why have people left her? So that was anger now of, but we've left her and everyone is fine with leaving my mom there. And then after that, just waking up the next morning and my mom not being there at home. The house was just cold and it was quiet, a different kind of quiet that doesn't make sense. And then I started feeling lonely and just sad that my mom was gone. So now we then came back, and then we had to go back in December to just be with family. And that's when it really hit me that my mom was not there. And then I went into a state of depression. And I want to believe that I actually went into what we call acute grief, which is the grief that is so intense that's all you're thinking about. So the stages of grief are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and then eventually acceptance. And for me, that took a long time. It took about a year to get to a point where I actually accepted that my mom was gone. I cried a lot. But eventually it got better. But even now, I cry about it. When I think about my mom, I do cry about it. It is not as raw as it was when it happened. And the reason why we continue having these emotions is just the trauma of death. You find that with me, I have gotten to a point where when I go to bed, I put my phone on silent. I don't answer calls at night or early in the morning because I'm scared of someone telling me that someone is gone. So that's the other side. The other side is people that refuse to put their phone on silent because they don't want to miss the message that someone may have died. So grief is a very complicated emotion, and it's very unique to individuals, and also the relationship with the person that you have lost, which is why I said where there was deep love, there is deep grief. I also want to talk about what it means in the different cultures, and just the whole women against men. In some cultures, they don't even encourage people to cry. I know when I was young, they used to say that if you lose a child, as a mother, you're not supposed to cry. Obviously, superstitious things. And I've never really understood why. But generally, you find that women cry more than men. It is just an expression of the emotions that you're going through at the end of the day. But what I've realized is you find that women, or the people that are very emotional, tend to deal with things better than those that are not. So you'll find that in general, people will be like, no, women are emotionally stronger than men. But I think it's because we express the emotions that are playing whatever battle they are in our bodies and in our minds. So we're able to talk about it and we're able to cry. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about is the benefits of crying. So you find that when things happen, so you've lost your job or you have lost a loved one, one of the most important things in getting over grief is crying. I know people are like, no, stop crying. You need to be strong. But I believe in that moment, there's really no need to be strong. You need to go through the emotions. They're inside anyway. You need to express them. And there's a lot of benefits of crying. And I'm sorry, guys, as women, we've been hogging crying like it's ours. But I want to encourage guys, cry. It is good for you. Crying detoxifies the body. When you cry, you feel this huge burden just lifting. And the unfortunate thing is, boys, when they're very little, they're already encouraged, don't cry, you're a boy. And girls are sort of encouraged to cry. But have you seen that when you hurt yourself as a kid, you'd cry? But as an adult, if you hit your thumb on the door or something, you don't cry. But if you cry, it's a way to soothe. It actually releases hormones that soothe the pain, and actually it dulls the pain where you'd have hurt yourself. which is why as a kid, if you hurt yourself, you'd cry. We just thought, kids just love crying, or, kids cry. But the truth is, if you hurt yourself and you cry, you actually release some hormones that actually dull the pain. And besides that, it soothes you. When you cry, it soothes you. I don't know if you've noticed with kids, when they're feeling sleepy, they either become naughty so you can beat them up and then they'll start crying, then they'll sleep. Or they just start crying out of nowhere. But it's actually a mechanism that God created. I mean, he gave us tear ducts for a reason. Kids start crying, and then after that, they fall asleep. The next thing is crying improves your mood. When I'm feeling very low, I sometimes just soak myself and I cry and cry and cry. When I leave there, I feel so relieved, like, I don't know, I can't even explain it. All I can say is try it, especially to the gentlemen in our church. Everywhere, boys, start crying. Crying is awesome. So it's like I said, it's a part of grieving. Basically, it's an expression of the grief that we're feeling inside, of the pain that we're feeling inside, and all the things that I've said. Crying will detoxify, crying will soothe you, and crying will dull the pain. And as a church, we need to start encouraging people to not look at crying as a weakness, but as something that God gave us, because it has a positive impact on us. It helps us to deal with things that happen around us. So when I looked at death due to COVID, I was actually reading an article about a woman that lost her 2 children. That cannot have been easy, because I also have a friend that lost her husband, and the unfortunate thing is she's still living in the house that they bought together. This woman is still living in the house where she raised these kids. It is difficult to move on when you're still in the environment where these people were, because you can see them everywhere. Everything reminds you of them. And I'm not necessarily saying move away or sell your house, but in the beginning of grief, or while you're in shock, it is advised to move away from the environment that sort of keeps reminding you of that person. So this friend of mine that lost her husband, we then decided that she should go to Vista Clinic. She actually was in there for 21 days, and that really helped. So that's the next thing that I want to talk about, support groups. So it may not necessarily be something that is structured or something that is from an organization. You yourself can decide, I know some people that have lost people. Let me go and talk to them so that I can understand how to deal with this thing. We need support. We were created to be relational beings. We need people to make us feel good. So she went there for 21 days. One of the things she said to me when she got out was, the stories the other women were sharing were so scary. And I'm glad that my husband did not die in that way. Her husband had been sick for a while, so she really had time to be with her husband. And she said one of the ladies there lost her husband through an accident. And that is more traumatic because you were with them the very day, and then the next thing they're gone. So for her, just talking to other women and realizing she's not alone. Because one of the things that really affects us, like I said earlier, is the unfairness of death. Why me? Why is it that this has chosen me, chosen my husband, chosen my kids? Why not the next person? So when you realize that actually there are other people that have lost, you realize you're not the only one. And you get to a point where the question, does Jesus care? You start realizing he really does, because he has given us time with these loved ones. Because at the end of the day, we all belong to God. We don't belong to anybody else. So God gives us a time and allows us to enjoy the presence of someone in our lives. And we need to appreciate that. But it is not a thing that you say to someone that is grieving in the moment to say, but God gave you time. Because in the moment, it doesn't make sense. It's a realization that someone that is grieving comes to during the process of grieving, because you need to get to that point by yourself. And which is, so going to my next point of the people that are taking care of someone that is grieving, or that are in the presence of someone that is grieving, do not feel compelled to bring solutions. Do not feel compelled to say the generic things that people say. Sometimes just sitting there and just understanding, because you don't need to understand what they're saying, because most of the time it doesn't make sense, but just understanding that this person is dealing. Just be there with them, and don't offer solutions, like I said. Offer a prayer, pray with them, offer your ear and say, if you ever need to talk, just call me, just reach out to me. Because most of the time when it's really fresh, we do not want to hear that things happened for a reason. We do not want to hear that it was their time. In the moment, we just want to go through the irrational things that are going through our minds that says, but I spoke to her yesterday, why is she gone? But I spoke to her yesterday, how is she gone? She should still be here, And also, why is she gone? She needs to be here right now. So it's an irrational thing that everyone goes through, especially the shock, because the shock just overwhelms you with different emotions, different thoughts. So in that moment, you're just confused. You don't even know that you're being confused. The person that's listening to you is the one that understands. So that's about what I really wanted to share with you guys regarding grief. And I'm just hoping if there are people that have questions, because I actually think this topic is it needs dialogue more than just a presentation. Yes, I can do a presentation and say, this is how we deal with a loss and things like that. But remember, grief and bereavement and all those things, they're very unique to a person. They're different depending on your personality, depending on who has died, depending on what it is that you've lost. So the emotions, it's a whole spectrum, which is why I think it needs to be a dialogue, and which is why support groups are so important, because like I said, these things are unique. So I'm just going to open up to questions, those that have questions, and those that want to add anything to the discussion. Okay, I see that there are questions on the chat. So the first one from Pam says, how best can we support family members with anxiety attacks whenever there's a slight cold or cough symptoms, seeing that we are also going through a cold season? I'm assuming this is for you, Pumza. And you answered that. Okay, so it doesn't look like there are any questions for me. So I'm going to hand it over to the chairman or the chairperson.
I just wrote on the chat, if people require more information in terms of self-isolation and how to protect your family, as Dr. Shandogani indicated, the NICD website has a vast of resources and information. So you can log onto there and you will find information that will help you. I am also putting on the chat as well, there is a Doctors on Call service by volunteer doctors. It's available Mondays to Fridays, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. And you can phone them and you can talk to them about anything COVID-19 related, questions, worries, anxieties. It's a totally free service. The only thing it requires, obviously, is airtime for you to be able to phone. Nyarai, there's a question here. How do you handle isolation and grieving at the same time?
Yeah, that is difficult. So if you are, in any Adventist church, there's usually a pastor and there's usually a counseling department. Reach out to those guys. But also, if you can get family members, like Phumza said earlier, to come and stay with you, that would help. But obviously, there are those that are totally isolated and are by themselves. One of the things that helped me, so like I said, grieving is very unique and it's a weird thing. Even if there's someone there, you feel like they're not going through the same thing that you are going through. So even if you're around people, you still feel isolated if you have experienced a loss. So I listened to a lot of music and I cried a lot. Like I said, I'm encouraging everyone to cry. I listened to a lot of music and it helped. Music soothes us. I listened to a lot of music. I listened to a lot of sermons. And so one other thing that happens when you grieve also is the changes that happen to you physically. So some people may experience headaches. I experienced loss of appetite. I had no appetite whatsoever. Everything, I just didn't want to eat. I could not sleep. I experienced insomnia, like bad insomnia. So if you are experiencing any one of those things, if you are able to go and see a psychiatrist or a doctor so that they can prescribe something for you to sleep, because you definitely need sleep. Sleep will help you to deal with things. When you don't sleep, it weakens your resolve, it weakens your immune system. So when you're able to sleep, it is easy to deal with things because your mind is fresh. And also try and take care of yourself as much as you can in isolation. Force yourself to exercise, just take a walk. Force yourself to reach out and talk to a friend. Force yourself to bath. Oh yeah, that's one of the things. I didn't want to bath. Like I just didn't see the need to bath or clean the house. But you need to force yourself to bring order around you. It will help you while you're in isolation to sort of deal with grief. But realize one thing, as unique grief is to you, the one thing that is true for all of us, it gets better. But in the time that you experience, it may not seem like so. It gets better. But also I want to say, we don't necessarily move on. It's just a shift. Life does not go back to normal when you've lost someone or you've lost something. It's a totally different life. And we need to start accepting that now my life is different because I no longer have a job. I no longer have my loved one in my life. How do I move forward? It needs to be something that you yourself come to a realization of. So if you're in isolation, take the different steps to sort of deal with grief. Like I said, exercise, bath, eat, and all those things, and reach out. Let me see if there's another question. I think that is yours, Phumza. It's talking about struggling with fatigue after quarantine.
In terms of the extreme fatigue, to be honest, I don't have anything special. I would advise a proper nutrition, a bit of sunlight, a bit of mild to moderate activity, walking, and that's just to help the body to secrete endorphins, which are your feel-good hormones. And yeah, that's other than what the basic taking care of yourself, I can't think of anything special to say. Rodney, do you want to add something?
Not much to add, but I think the important thing is that after, I'm assuming the person who's quarantining is actually meaning that they're coming from isolation. But the important part is that if you have had the infection, the infection has taken so much of your resolve in terms of the energy and your immune system, because you're battling with the virus. So expectation is that you cannot expect that you're going to get back from de-isolation to the same level of functioning that you were on before you fell sick. So you need to start gradually getting yourself into the paces, exercising as has been mentioned. So you cannot really expect that you're probably going to sit in an office on an 8-hour day and manage all that. I would actually think that employers or supervisors need to allow people to work short hours, for example, so that one can recuperate, because the effect of the virus does not end when you have de-isolated at day 10. You still have the after effects of the disease. I've read an article that indicated that one of the patients who tested positive for COVID, actually day 63, 64, they still had viruses in the body that they could isolate in terms of the cultures. So it really varies from person to person. Thank you.
I think just to summarize, if you were to forget everything that we said today, just remember these 3 points. 1, stay alert. Just because you are with friends, just because you are with colleagues, does not mean you cannot get infected. As much as possible, I know this may sound, my friends call me mean, but it's okay. Try and avoid attending funerals. They tend to be, in South Africa at the moment, a breeding ground for the spread of the virus. The second thing is stay healthy, watch what you eat, augment your immune system, augment your lung capacity by doing deep breathing exercises. The deep breathing also helps to take care of the anxiety, because it helps to calm you down. Those struggling with hypertension, it does help to reduce your blood pressure, and it's shown to have other benefits. You can Google that. So stay healthy as much as you can. If you have any coexisting medical conditions, now is the time to ensure that you take your treatment as prescribed and you try to be as compliant to your treatment as possible. And then lastly, stay calm. Yes, it is scary. Yes, we see people dying, but I think we should not forget that more than 85% of people that get COVID will have mild disease and will be fine. It's the 15% that need to worry. And that is essentially it. I will check one last time if there are no questions. And if not, we will then thank everyone for attending. Are there any questions, last things that you want to ask? And while you are thinking, I was reading one of the government gazette documents about the handling of loved ones should you have someone die at home from COVID. The advice is please do not handle the deceased as much as possible. Call the ambulance and they will be the ones to determine and certify death. And obviously, there are then the guidelines in terms of how you handle your loved one in terms of mortuary and burial. But try as much as possible not to touch patients that are infected. I see there are no questions. I'd like to thank all of you for having attended our talk. I hope you gained some new information. Hope you feel a bit reassured. And yeah, let's stay safe. Let's augment our immune systems and yeah, enjoy the rest of your Sabbath. Thank you.
Sikuyo indlela elizwela bomi ikhaya labantu bahlengwe ninake uThixo